Welcome to the Inner Reboot with Sam and Heidi, your weekly pit stop to shake off the stress, laugh at life's plot twists and recharge your mindset. Because let's be honest, transformation doesn't have to be boring or involve 75 different types of smoothie.
So grab a drink, smoothies if you must, and join us for the wins, the fails and the awkward bits, because sometimes the biggest breakthroughs start with an inner reboot and occasionally forgetting why you even walked into the room.
Hello.
Hello, you all right?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
Brilliant.
Good.
So we have decided this week to talk about imposter syndrome.
We have.
Yeah, which is, okay, I always do this, don't I? Explain to me what imposter syndrome is. I always do this
How
to
do I
you.
never get in there early
You
enough?
never get in quick enough. You'll remember next
for goodness
week.
sake. I always forget. I always forget you're going to do it to me. So in my words, imposter syndrome, although recently not found out because I don't think it's a fact yet, but people talk about it in terms of phenomenon, which you've got loads of insight about. But it largely, for me, is the feelings of not feeling good enough, not feeling like you deserve to be in that room or that what you have to say is valid. And I guess it fuels anxiety and it fuels that overthinking and over worrying because you might have a number of things that make you feel that way. So it could be you've got some limiting beliefs bubbling under, or it could be that you feel like everybody else has got a certain level of knowledge or a certain level of experience. Like you can sort of make up rules in your head that then also fuel the imposter feelings.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think an awful lot of people feel it fleetingly, probably. But I think there is also a difference between imposter syndrome feelings versus the usual anxiety or worrying or nerves when you're just about to go and do something. I think there's a real difference.
Yeah, because I think there's
in
a
that.
difference between imposter syndrome and low self-esteem as well, but it does feed into it. But I think for me, imposter syndrome, in the way that I've experienced it, is almost that fear of if I've done something that I know a lot about, I then fear that somebody will come forward and go, that's not right. Or like proving me wrong, or almost like I'm not the expert. And
Yeah.
it's what people call getting found out. Like it's
Yes.
that thing, I'm going to get found out or caught or whatever. That's kind of how I've experienced it. But I went down a bit of a rabbit hole and did a bit of research. And apparently it was two female psychologists in 1978 that sort of discovered imposter syndrome, I suppose. And it was in high performing women. And I guess at that time, if you think late 70s, it's a really prevalent time of women trying to prove themselves in the workplace and, get on the career ladder and all this stuff. And that's where it comes from. But it's not a clinical disorder. So it's not diagnosable. So it's an experience, not a clinical disorder, which I found really interesting, which is where your point that you found out is it's a phenomenon, not something clinical or medical, which I found fascinating. And it's as much, I think, as it's now universal across demographics, which is really interesting, there's still a lot of underrepresented areas where it's really prevalent, like female high achievers, minorities, neurodivergent people, first generational as well, those types of careers. So it's really fascinating to learn about like where it is, but also the bit that I really want to explore is like, where does it come from? How does it impact us? And where do we see it the most? Almost like, where does it manifest itself from? And what is happening in organizations or teams or groups of people where it's making it worse almost, and how do you create that space to make it better or dull it down,
I think there's so much to explore with it, isn't there? And I think it's always something I've been aware of and it's always something I felt, but it's not been something that I've delved into, done any research on, or sort of heard more of, apart from I went to one book launch about imposter syndrome and she talked lots about it, not much of which I can recall off the top of my head. But the one thing that does really stand out is like if you are in the right environment or you have the right context or you have the right support, you don't have to suffer with it, you can change that narrative and you can sort of retrain your brain. That obviously takes an awful lot of insight and a lot of awareness, but also a lot of feedback. That was one thing I did take from that feedback is it has to be really, really specific. And so I think to your point, when we're at work in organizations, very rarely do we get really specific feedback that is helpful and positive that also sort of puts imposter back in its box because I've always had really positive reviews. I've always had really positive like performance conversations, and there's always been that like, oh, you're going to go far and you've done really well, and like all of those types of statements. But I've never had the really specifics in terms of like, you're really good at this and you really excelled in these situations. And like, I could really see the potential in this situation or anything like that. Nothing was ever specific. And so it just doesn't help.
That's a really interesting point because if you think about imposter syndrome, it comes from a fear of not feeling good at what you do, in a nutshell, basically. So if you take that and think, okay, that's about competency, we're either competent or we're not competent in certain areas. And the imposter syndrome would kick into somebody that does have that competency, but doesn't believe that they're doing it good enough or navigating it well enough. So the feedback part is the reason it needs to be specific is because it's not just about saying, hey, that was a really good session you just ran, or you were really great in that meeting. It's about nailing down
what
what it
was
is
great
to
about
feed
it?
the competence.
What,
And then what
yeah,
ends up happening is you can almost have an identity shapeshift. So if you know where your competencies are because people are feeding that back to you, then you start to identify with it in a different manner, which then creates that shapeshift around the brain thinking and believing in a different way. But it's really hard to do because we need others to help us do it.
yeah, I think that's the biggest point, isn't it? Like, and it shows up so differently in so many people. So I don't think, and the reason for it is so different for so many different people. Yeah, so I don't think it is a blanket sort of one size fits all approach in terms of organizations, managers, individuals, in terms of the direct solutions. But I do think there are some common things that we can do to help it, like raise awareness, like specific feedback, etc. And what you've said just massively resonates because I think I do feel really competent and have done. And I would look at job descriptions and I would look at like my promotion options or whatever and be like, I am definitely competent to do that. And I would feel competent enough to apply and or to get the promotions or whatever and to put my case forward. It's more when I'm in the moment and in the rooms or then doing the thing when imposter would get really loud.
I wonder whether that's because I almost feel like people need to give themselves like a little skills audit, like list down of where,
Yeah.
where their competencies are to kind of get that embedded in your brain because I think there is a big difference between applying for the role because you can tick off all of those skills that are required for it. But then once you get in it, I think imposter raises its head because it says, okay, now you've got to prove yourself. You've said you can do it. Now you've actually got to do it. And that's where that part of the low self-esteem comes in slightly to think, oh God, have I oversold myself or have I really have to prove my worth. And in organizations, I see a lot of perfectionism. And it's not about just hitting that target or meeting that deadline. It's always that push to go above and beyond,
Yeah.
and to do it better and to deliver more. And then you're in the realms of like anxiety and depression and burnout and all of these things that feed the beast almost then start to come to play. And yeah, before we know it, we're basically just a dribbling mess that doesn't trust anything that head's telling us.
Well, they're the only things that are celebrated, aren't they? Like
Yeah.
those things that actually force that are the things that are celebrated. You don't hear success or celebration in terms of people that are like doing their thing, but doing it really well or really consistently or always deliver a certain level of quality over the things that are really easy to publicize and to shout about and talk about. And so
Yeah.
therefore that also feeds it, particularly if you're in roles where it's not no matter how hard you work, it's not as visible, it's not as tangible, or it's not as easy to be like, oh, well, this person sold this amount of work or whatever, as an example. Some roles are much more less obvious than that. And I also think what you said about like you can apply for the role and then you've got to prove it and you've got to do it. You've also take into the mix what we've talked about before, but around strengths. Like so many things into play, don't they? Because I went for a role and got my promotions based on my competence and what the role looked like and what I was expecting it to be. What I didn't take into consideration at all was some of the strengths, as in the personal skills and attributes that I would have to deploy far more than I ever even considered that weren't a strength. So therefore, my energy's on the floor. I'm trying to prove to myself to do something that isn't what I thought it was, but also doesn't lean into my strengths. So already the imposter can get really loud because I'm sort of proving it.
Yeah, and then you're
Because,
feeding the limiting beliefs as well,
yeah.
which just keeps underpinning it. It's really interesting, actually. I read an article and it said that there's a few areas where it's really prevalent. So high performers is one area, which
Mm-hmm.
makes total sense to me. And industries were IT and tech, which is really interesting because if you think about it, they are in that arena to constantly progress, constantly do more, constantly evolve, innovate, do better. So it makes sense why those are the industries where imposter syndrome is really high. But with high performance, something that years ago I worked in a company that used a 9-box grid, to benchmark where you are at the end of the year. And there's always that top right-hand box, which is your outperforming, out behavior. Everything has to be above and beyond. Are you the brand ambassador for the organization? Are your behaviors over and above, in line, whatever? And I always used to look at that and think they're really pushing you into that box. But what's fascinating is you didn't get recruited in the role to be in that box. You got recruited in the role for all of the things that you've just outlined, which is, are you competent and able to fulfill this role to the best of your ability? Which of course you are. But then if you're being pushed all of the time to reach that box, it's no wonder high performers have imposter syndrome because they're constantly having to do more. And even that, once you get in that box, they're then going, well, we can deploy you in another part of the business because you've now entered that box. So you're ready for a move. And then before you know it, you're probably in a role that you didn't even intend to be in anyway, just because you've got a promotion or whatever it might
Yeah.
be. So therefore, that vicious circle starts again. Do I know enough? Am I good enough? Now I've got to prove my worth all over again. So it never really ends. And I think in organizations culturally, we probably don't do enough, perhaps leaders and managers of people don't do enough to really value the skill and competency that they have in the team and talk about it a lot. So you're embedding that in the person and giving them confidence and reducing low self-esteem for them to be able to go, I've nailed this, now I'm ready, rather than I'm living with this imposter every single day and I'm already being pushed in a different direction. Like I think culturally there needs to be a shift.
Well, I think there's a few things, aren't there? And we've talked about these as well, like in terms of giving everybody the skills and the knowledge, not the skills, the knowledge and the insights about themselves as an individual. What are your strengths? What do you enjoy doing? What's really going to push you further? What's not? Where do you even want to be? Like, do you want to be continually progressing, or do you want to get really, really good at the thing that you're really good at already? And do you want to really sort of hone that in? Like, what's important to you? Actually, is important. Like, is having a balance important to you right now, rather than any of these types of career conversations as well? Because I think we also don't have that space either. Like, it's sort of like unless you really want to press on, you can't have any other type of conversation. Like, it's all about like go, go, go. And I think there's equipping people and individuals. I think there's equipping managers with that knowledge and insight about their teams, which we don't do enough of. So I think there's more and more manager development happening, and that seems to be more common, which is good. But I don't think there's still enough of equipping managers to know their teams properly to then help their teams navigate this. And then I also think organizations particularly now, are like try and help. So if you think about psychological safety or creating a good environment, that to me still comes across as how can we make people feel like they can tell us if they have a disability or that they need some additional support, or like tell us some fundamental things about an individual. It doesn't, for me at the moment, scream that organisations are thinking about psychological safety in terms of people being able to share their ideas and speak up about um, like what's important to them, or share some of their concerns about a direction of
Hmm.
travel on a piece of work or a project or whatever. So I think that still has an awful long way to go. And I think those things will really help individuals feel more comfortable and confident in what they are bringing.
Yeah, definitely. I think I mean, we call it no judgment zone, don't we? But I don't think there's enough of that at the moment. And also, is it the blind leading the blind? Which it may well be, because how many of those managers are walking around with an imposter, you know?
Yeah,
And that's the thing as well. Like, I think creating the safe space is the first step of like actually being able to talk about it and why people feel the way that they do. But I think as well, if you take it outside of the workplace and think about the environment that we live in now in terms of social media and all of that, there is a lot around perfectionism and leveling up and self
comparison.
development and all of that stuff. So we're constantly living in this world where A, we don't feel that we're good enough. And B, it's being thrown at us every day that we have to have these perfect lives and do this particular exercise or take this particular thing because it will make you feel this way. There's so much. People probably don't know which way to turn and where to even start.
I'm glad. Yeah, I think it's sort of, it used to be, I guess, probably more manageable, because if you felt it at work, you would just come home and then you'd be in your little bubble and it'd be fine. And we no longer live like that. But also, I think through social media, you've got the comparison, but you've also got, and it's being thrown at you. And so you can't avoid it. And this is something we literally were talking about earlier this morning, but I think it, there's so much less time for creativity. There's so much less time for your own thinking, and there's so much less time to explore what you want to explore. And I think both in a work sense, both in a like personal sense, like it's almost you're drip fed so much that when you want to go to do something, it's like, oh well, I must do it like that because that's the thing that's being drip fed me or that most people are doing. And like we have those conversations all the time about our offer and how we get that out there. Like, do we try and think about how we get that out that's authentic to us? Or it's so easy to get wrapped up in, well, this is what everyone else is doing and they're successful, so surely I should do it like that. And why didn't I think about that? Because I should have thought about that. And
Yeah,
then,
but then there's also that fear of like, if I do it that way, am I going to get found out? So it
yeah,
loops
yeah,
back to the
yeah,
beginning of like, oh
yeah.
God, what if somebody messages me and like, you stole my thing or whatever? But I guess, yeah, the point of what you're saying is around, are we originals? Are we the OGs at what we do? And I think there's so much influence out there and so much available to us and so much learning and so much that we can consume. I 9 times out of 10 feel more muddled
Mm,
than I would if I didn't consume all of that and I just started with a piece of paper and was like, right, I need to just get my head straight.
yeah,
Um, but we don't, because we're always seeking the next thing. But it is, yeah, I think that perfectionism piece is the bit that really gets me.
yeah. Yeah, I think perfectionism, it's really hard to step away from, because also I do think there is a culture around us everywhere, work and at home, where if you don't get it right or it's not what is expected of you, you're not good enough and you've failed. And I think if you go and have like those conversations with individuals one to one and with your friends and family, that's not how they feel. But I think the overwhelming sense is, well, Christ, I've got to get this right all of the time.
Mm.
And that's a lot.
It is a lot. Yeah, I think it is good to speak to family and friends and stuff. And I do think that is a good outlet. But again, it loops back to what you said at the very beginning about the feedback piece of like, the feedback there would be, but of course you're amazing, you're great because they're your family and friends and that's what
I
they want to
mean,
do, make you feel wonderful. But it doesn't hit home in terms of that identity shift of actually being able
yeah.
to accept it yourself. That's the problem. Um, but then,
Don't you love
yeah,
just talking about that, not being able to do the identity shift, don't you just love the comments where it's like, "Well, just don't do that. Just don't think like that." Like, just
have positive affirmations every day. That doesn't actually
tell
help
that to be
with
quiet,
imposter
like, tell it this
syndrome. Yeah.
nonsense, and it's like, oh, yeah,
Yeah.
because you actually with lots of the stuff we talk about, like, it's rewiring thought
It
processes.
is. Yeah, it
It's
is a
not just
rewire.
turning something on or off. There's obviously elements of that, and you have to keep doing that in order to rewire, but there's no real simple fix, but I think there are multiple things that feed it.
Yeah, and it doesn't help that we're hardwired to focus on the negative.
Think negatively,
It's
yeah.
just how we are. And it's a bit of a mountain to climb to get over that and actually have true faith and belief in yourself, especially when you're trying something new. I think it's, within an organization, it's the day to day, am I good enough comparisons of, but then in day to day life, it's more around actually identifying who you are. And I think your point about the strengths is a really good one because it does enable you to know where your energy comes from because that in turn stops that negative energy. Um, but I think unless you have a bit of a cull of the things that are influencing you, it's really difficult to do. Like
I
obviously I said to you that Liv had deleted TikTok. My daughter deleted TikTok a few months ago. And it was like, I just needed to get 4 hours of my life back every day. It's just too much. There's too much
what could I be
influence.
doing with my
But I
time?
do think that's a thing though. And I do think that we're probably going to see a shift in the way that people interact with social media because it is causing people to become really diluted in their own thoughts and their own behaviors and their own actions to get them where they want to go because we're constantly seeking that dopamine hit of the next thing.
Validation.
Yeah.
Like, we need constant validation. And I think as well as so I'm trying to think about what's made the biggest difference to me because it doesn't hit me as hard as it used to. It does still, as you all very much know. Um, but I think your environment makes such a difference, um, in terms of whether that's work, whether it's home, whether it's who you follow, what's coming up on your feed, all of that stuff makes a difference. But I also think from a work sense, um, doing roles that weren't in alignment with either what my strengths were or what brings me joy, or noticing the roles that caused me real anxiety around some tasks I had to do or some situations I had to be in, removing myself from them massively helped because it allowed it was remove myself from that situation. And so therefore the imposter quietened. But also my imposter was loudest when I was at my most senior in an organisation where I'd been for 10 years. So I'd started there in a junior role, and had a really good career and ended up from an administrator role leading the function and strived for that and really, really pushed in order to get recognised as an associate director in the organisation, all of that stuff, because I thought, as most people do, when you get there, either everything will disappear or I can no longer have imposter anymore because
You've
I've
made it.
proved it wrong. Like, I've done it,
Yeah.
I've made it. And actually it just got a million times worse because I was having to prove myself on a daily basis at a level that I felt really vulnerable at. And in comparison to my peers, didn't feel like I had, um, I don't know, the education or the knowledge or the skill or the eloquent words in order to be there. And so therefore I constantly felt like I was an imposter and would be found out. However, when I removed myself from that, and I don't regret it at all, like, I'm so pleased that I'd done that. But then when I moved on to a new role, it was almost like I'd been like, none of that history was there and that baggage was there. So it was like, right, I am here based on how I've shown up, my CV, my experience, and what this role is going to be. And I feel really confident in that now. But also, I purposely went to a bigger organization. So the role was still, it was like the equivalent of my role, but because I was in a bigger organization, I didn't have the level of responsibility, and I wasn't at like an associate director level because the organization was massive. And so therefore I instantly felt more competent and capable and confident because I guess a level of exposure had reduced as well. And so therefore, what I know about me now as a result of not only experiencing it, but doing the switch, I know what makes a difference. And I know that I know what I don't want to be exposed to, but also I love doing what I do, and I love doing the thing rather than being a leader in an organization of the thing.
In turn, then is your identity shift, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's where it came into play. I think mine,
I mean,
I
it took
don't,
4 years, but
yeah, I don't think my story's not the same. It's different, but it still gave me perspective. So it's almost the opposite end. So going from a role that was very big at a senior level to then stepping into a role that was much less senior, what that did was enabled me to do the other thing. I mean, it's the outcome is the same because you're still seeing your worth. You know, you're
yeah,
identifying what your strengths are, what your competencies are. But mine was the other way around. So I then started to identify actually what I was really good at and why I wasn't sort of being fulfilled in the role that I was in was because I knew more and I knew I had different skills and I knew I had different
yeah.
competencies. So it's almost the outcome is the same, awareness of who you are and what you want, but on the opposite end. And that was really important for me because it enabled me to understand actually it removed a bit of the imposter because I was actually able to go, no, I'm really good at this, but I'm not very good at that.
It becomes more
And
black and white, doesn't it?
it does. It's so much more black and white. And I think that there's so many random cliche things around imposter syndrome to try, like, oh, you know, like I mentioned before, like do 3 daily affirmations, whatever. That's fine, but it doesn't really get you anything tangible with
Not if you don't
imposter
change
syndrome anyway.
anything.
Yeah, because you need to change something. And I think especially within organisations, there's not enough time spent identifying individual competencies and what you enjoy versus what you need to learn versus what you don't need to learn. And I think we put so much pressure on we need to learn everything.
Filling the weaknesses.
Yes. And instead of going, but realistically, do I need to learn that thing because I'm not going to use it, for example? You know, just because everybody else is learning it, I don't need to. So it's also being true to yourself and what you do actually need to know and what you don't need to know. And I think that's something that there's probably not much of a spotlight on.
No, that's a really, really good point. And I think like the more you follow the process, I guess, particularly if you're in an organization, I guess even if you're like looking at stuff personally and through social media, whatever, the more you just follow that without questioning it, I think the more opportunity your imposter has to speak up, because you're not stopping to go, is this what I want? Is it important to me? Do I need it? What am I trying to solve? All of those types of questions, because we sort of go, well, obviously I need it because that's the next thing to
Mm.
do. But it might be for that person over there, but it might not be for you. And if you do it, you're not giving yourself any of that data or insight. If you're not stopping and questioning, you might still go ahead and do it, and that's fine. I think for me, it also confirmed, not even confirmed because I didn't really realize it before, but that like you can still advance your career without having to put yourself in roles that don't feel safe. So my move was still an advancement in terms of my career and my skill set and my opportunities and what I delivered. But I went from a associate director title to a partner title, as in like a learning partner title, not a managing director partner title.
I'm a partner
um,
of the company.
and the job titles, A, don't mean anything, like when you don't have the context around them. But also, you can still advance your career without having to take the things that make you feel really uncomfortable with you. Like, you don't just have to put up with those. Like, I love it. I love nothing more when somebody that perhaps has become a manager because it's their next step in their career, or they've taken on a role because it makes sense and they're trying to advance their career, and that's fine. And then after a couple of years, they go, actually, no, no,
Mm,
that actually isn't for me. So I'm going to move this way, or I'm going to do something slightly different, because then you see them flourish and you see them thrive.
yeah. I think that's that bit about being true to self as well. Um, and the psychological safety thing really feeds in. I observed a workshop last year now, and the facilitator was really, really good. And it kind of feeds into both points, because she said, A, she did a really good job of creating this psychologically safe environment. But the other thing she did was say to them, she gave them reflection time, and she's like, what parts have been really important to you? Which are the bits that you're definitely going to let go of because you just know that you don't need them, you're not going to use them? And what part might you need a bit more? And it was a really different way of asking, not, she wasn't asking for feedback, but giving them the reflection time to ask themselves what they needed. And she was talking about the entire content of the workshop. So she's saying, you're not here because we're forcing this learning down your throat. You know,
Yeah.
you don't have to take all of this. I'm literally asking you what wasn't useful, what you're going to get rid of and let go of, and what you're going to concentrate on. And it just enabled the group to really home in on what is important for me to know now, and how does it relate to the job that I do and the skills that I need, so that this imposter doesn't keep popping up? And what can I happily say, I don't need that, I'm going to let go of it? Because then you're not living up to that thing and you're not being marked against that thing. And it was just a really interesting way of looping all of it together, like creating a safe space, um, enabling people to see what was important to them and what they should onboard in terms of a new competency, and then what they shouldn't. And I was like, that's a really interesting way of doing it. Yeah, it was good.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. I think what was really important, what jumped out for me when you was just talking about that was, and it was a really subtle word, but you just put the word now in there. And I think that's also really important, because it's what was important for them right there at that time, in the role, in their context, etc. Not necessarily what do you need to onboard forever, or what do you need to let go of forever. And I think we can also forget that at times as well, because our environments change, our context change, we change. And so therefore what's important might change, or what we need to focus on might change and might shift. And I don't think we often give ourselves enough space to be able to, like, remember that and do that and think about that. Um,
Maybe that's the point, though, isn't it? Of like outside the workplace, with all of this influence that we have around us for perfectionism and certain standards, maybe that's the way to navigate it, is what do I need right now?
mm,
Rather than what's expected of me, what I should be doing is being able to look at it and say, I need this now, I might need that later, but right now I'm going to concentrate on this. So it's almost comes back to those baby steps of like one thing at a time for the right reason in the right time.
that's why I had to retrain my algorithm, didn't I? Or I'm trying to, from you, because I can remember Sam sent me a meme or a reel or something, and I was like, oh my God, my Instagram is so heavy and so, like, I don't know how it happened. Well, I do, but it got really, like, mindful focused, and but in a heavy way. And it got really, like, focused in terms of, like, how to make yourself feel better, which I understand. But then when you're following multiple people doing that, that gets really overwhelming. And I had to do like a gazillion things every week in order to feel slightly sane. And Sam just sent me some funny ones, and I was like, right, that's it. I'm culling.
Oh,
Oh,
my.
and it was people that do journaling as well, which I love to watch. But every single time it come up, it
And we
made me
know you've
think I
tried.
needed to journal. So I got rid of those as well. And I just now have, like, I don't know, you send me loads of squirrels, and you funny
I
squirrels
did,
and,
yeah,
like,
yeah.
just funny things on there, because it, unless you're conscious of it, it is mad how it reinforces your thinking.
Really does. How much impact it has is just crazy, absolutely crazy. But yeah, it is an interesting topic, and I think we probably don't give it enough airspace, I guess, is in the round, my view of it. I don't think we talk about it enough, really. And we definitely don't talk about the feelings that surround it, which is why I think it's not, psychologists say, like, it isn't a clinical diagnosis, it's not a mental illness, it's an experience. So if you go all the way back to their definition of it and think about everything that we've just talked about, everything that we've covered is experiences
Yeah.
that make us feel a certain way. And that's not what we're not shining the spotlight on that enough of what did I just experience and how did it make me feel and what do I need right now, I guess, are the three pots, to
Yeah,
look at.
because I think a lot of, and I guess what I hear a lot, we can talk about it quite flippantly. I think we end up talking about quite a lot of things quite flippantly, not me and you, but like just society. But also it's sort of become, or if we're not careful, it can become a label rather than a feeling that you can do something about. And I guess that's the biggest thing. Like, we don't have to feel this sense of imposter all of the time. We can take a breath and stop and see what's going on around us that hopefully will give us some
Yeah,
insight.
because it might not be imposter, it might be low self-esteem,
Mm,
which is different. Yes, they feed into each other, but because, having low self-esteem doesn't always result in having imposter syndrome. So I think that's a good point actually. Do we label things too quickly? And then it's easy to hang your hat on that, isn't it? When you're
yeah.
speaking to somebody, oh, it's because I've got imposter syndrome. But actually take a deep dive and kind of figure out what that is. It might not be for some
Well, and
people.
is it imposter, or is it there there are times when you're doing something that's big and scary and new and different and overwhelming, and so therefore,
Might be anxiety.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think
Mm.
that's the thing, like, where does it pop up, and actually does it go completely afterwards? Is it really specific events, or is it a bit more
Yeah.
across multiple things? Yeah.
Interesting topic. I've enjoyed
Indeed.
talking about this.
Yeah, I think I really need to read the book that I went to the book launch for.
Mm.
Um,
What was the book called? It would
the
be good
book
to
is
know, actually.
called, I was right in front of me. It's called The Imposter Phenomenon, by Dr. Kate Atking. And there's
Okay.
some there are some really helpful bits in the back of the book,
Okay.
for like in terms of for you, and also if you're a
Mm.
manager and if you're in an organization and stuff like that, like what can you do to help it, etc. But it basically, yeah, it's like a workbook. So it's like, why do you feel
Mm.
like a fraud? Why do you feel like this? And what can you actually do about it? And it helps you do the what can you do about it,
Great. So
which is
that
quite helpful.
reflection piece and then moving into action piece. I'm going
Yeah.
to read that. I haven't read it. So yeah,
Um, yes, I
sounds
would
good.
recommend. I've flicked through. I haven't read it back to back, but it is also, I went to, just hearing her talk about it was just
Yeah.
like so informative
Mm.
and really helpful. So yeah, we'll put that in the show notes
Yeah.
description.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks for a lush chat.
Yeah,
That was probably one of our heavier ones, actually.
it was. But good though. Needed and good.
Hopefully heavy but digestible in a way that you can do something with.
Yes, for sure.
Jokes. Enjoy your day.